Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the true speedster of the multiverse over Wally. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in the unforeseen simulation joint was thick with the coppery tang of blood and the dry, acrid dust of pulverized concrete. It was an atmosphere of failure, a suffocating blanket woven from the terrified gasps of children and the strained grunts of the world's greatest hero. For Izuku Midoriya, pinned behind a rock with Mineta and Azuri, every particle of that air was a testament to his own powerlessness. He watched, his green eyes wide with a unique blend of analytical horror and hero worship, as the battle raged at the plaza's center. It wasn't a fight, it was a collision of immovable objects. On one side, All Might, the symbol of peace, his iconic smile a strained, furious grimace. His fists, which could change the weather with a single punch, were moving in a blur, each impact sounding less like a blow and more like a localized sonic boom. On the other, the Noma, a grotesque parody of a man, its brain exposed and pulsating, its skin the color of a deep bruise. It didn't flinch. It didn't feel. It just absorbed. Detroit. Smash! All Might roared, his fist connecting with the creature's chest. A shockwave erupted, a visible dome of distorted air that blasted debris and villains alike across the plaza. It was a blow that should have leveled a city block. The Noma was driven back, its feet gouging twin trenches in the stone, but its arm, already wrapped around All Might's side, didn't release its grip. The flesh on its chest was mangled, a crater of ruined muscle, but even as Izuku watched, the tissue began to writhe and knit back together with an unnatural speed. "It's no good," Izuku whispered, his voice trembling. His notebook was back at school, but the analysis was happening all the same, a frantic, desperate stream of consciousness in his mind. Shock absorption. That's its primary quirk. All Might is hitting it with everything he has, but it's like punching a mountain made of memory foam. The force is dispersed. And that regeneration, it's too fast. It's not just healing, it's negating the damage entirely. He's going to lose, isn't he? Mineta whimpered from beside him, his grape-like hair quivering. Tsuyu Azuri placed a steadying hand on Mineta's shoulder, though her own wide eyes were fixed on the struggle. All Might's never lost before, Karo. But her voice lacked conviction. They could all see it. The steam, faint at first, was now beginning to rise from the hero's body in more noticeable wisps. His time was running out. The villain, with hands clasped all over his body, Tamura Shigaraki, let out a dry, rasping cackle that scraped at Izuku's nerves. "You see, hero? You're finished. Noma was designed for you, a bioengineered anti-symbol of peace. He has your strength, but none of your weaknesses. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't bleed out. He just endures." All Might grunted, trying to pry the Noma's hand from his side. The creature's grip was like forged steel. He could feel the pressure on the old wound beneath his shirt, a phantom ache that threatened to become a catastrophic, body-riveting reality. He was at his limit. No, he was past it, running on fumes in the sheer, indomitable will that had defined his entire career. But Will couldn't punch forever. Shigaraki scratched his neck, flakes of dry skin falling to the ground. "Kurogyri," he rasped to the misty Warp Gate villain. "Let's help him along. Get the kids. If we start killing his students, his famous smile might finally break for good." Izuku's blood ran cold. He saw the swirling vortex of Kurogyri's body begin to expand, his yellow eyes fixing on their hiding spot. He saw Shigaraki take a step forward, his hand outstretched, 5 fingers ready to turn one of his friends to dust. And in that moment, something inside Izuku Midoriya snapped. It wasn't a conscious thought. It was an instinct, a primal, screaming imperative that drowned out all fear, all logic, all self-preservation. It was the same instinct that had sent him, a quirkless boy, running towards a sludge monster to save a childhood friend who hated him. It was the distillation of his entire being. A hero saves people. He's in trouble. He's in trouble, and I'm just watching. I have his power. A sacred torch passed to me, and I'm hiding behind a rock while it's about to be extinguished. The image of All Might, his fist raised, telling a crying boy on a rooftop, You can become a hero, flashed through his mind. It wasn't a memory, it was a covenant. A promise he had sworn to uphold. Midoriya, what are you doing? Ajri's voice was a distant echo. He was moving. He didn't remember making the decision to stand, but his legs were already coiled, the familiar, humming warmth of one for all flooding his limbs. He knew what would happen. He had only ever managed to use 100% in single, isolated appendages, and the result was always the same: shattered, purpled flesh, bones reduced to powder. To use it in his entire body, to propel himself across the plaza, it would be catastrophic. It would cripple him. But the alternative, watching his mentor die, watching his friends be targeted, was unthinkable. If this is the only way, if my body is the price for even a single second of distraction, then it's a price I have to pay. One for all. 100%! He didn't shout the words. He became them. The world didn't just slow down, it fractured. The sensation was nothing like his previous uses of the quirk. This wasn't just power flowing into a limb. It was a supernova igniting in the core of his being. Green, bioelectric energy, crackling like a storm, erupted from his skin. The pebbles around his feet levitated, vibrating with the sheer output of energy. The air pressure around him dropped so suddenly that his ears popped. To the others, it was a blur. A green comet streaking from the waterlogged zone towards the central plaza. To Izuku, it was an eternity of agony and clarity. He felt the tibia and fibula in both legs snap like twigs under the strain of the initial push-off. The pain was a white-hot scream that his brain barely had time to register before the next wave hit. His muscles, unprepared for this level of output, tore themselves from their anchor points. He was a human rocket, and his body was the fuel, burning away with every microsecond of thrust. He saw Kurogyri turning, his misty form coalescing to intercept him. He saw Shigaraki's head whip around, his red eyes widening behind the hand on his face, a flicker of genuine surprise in their depths. He saw the Nomu, still locked onto All Might, a monolithic wall of muscle and bone. That was his target. He didn't have the strength to fight it. He didn't have the durability to survive a collision. All he had was momentum. All he could offer was a distraction. Just move it! Move it off of him. Give him an opening. He channeled everything, the pain, the fear, the desperation, the unwavering adoration for the man he was trying to save, into his right arm. The green lightning of One for All converged on his fist, so dense and bright it looked like he was holding a miniature sun. The skin on his knuckles split, and the bones in his forearm groaned, threatening to turn to dust before he even made impact. But as he flew through the air, a broken, blazing projectile of pure heroic will, something else happened. Something impossible. The energy he was generating, this unrestrained torrent of One for All, was more than just kinetic force. It was the culmination of 9 generations of power, a stockpile of life force and energy that had reached a critical, unprecedented mass. It pushed against the fabric of his reality, not just physically, but dimensionally. For 100 trillionth of a second, the universe around Izuku Midoriya flickered. The air in front of him didn't just compress, it tore. It wasn't a rip or a hole, but a subtle, sickening shearing of space-time. A microscopic fracture, no bigger than a pinprick, opened directly in his path. It was a wound in the wall that separated his world from all the others. A flaw in the glass, and on the other side of that glass, something ancient and infinite noticed. It was a force, not a consciousness. A river of kinetic energy that flowed through and between every reality in an endless, thrumming multiverse. It was the source of all motion, the alpha and omega of velocity. It was the speed force. Normally, it was a closed system, accessible only to those born with the right key, those chosen by its strange, unknowable whims. But the raw, sacrificial power Izuku was unleashing was a unique phenomenon. It wasn't just a request for speed. It was a desperate, selfless prayer for the power to save someone, broadcast with the force of an exploding star. The sheer nobility of the act, combined with the phenomenal energy output of a 9-generation stockpiling quirk, acted like a universal tuning fork. It resonated with the Speed Force's very nature. The Speed Force saw him. It saw the broken boy, the burning will, the unwavering heart. And in that infinitesimal moment, the river found a new, irresistible channel. A torrent of lightning, a color unlike anything in Izuku's world, erupted from the dimensional fissure. It was not the green of One for All. It was a fusion of primal crimson and brilliant, hopeful gold. It didn't arc or flash, it poured. It slammed into Izuku's outstretched fist a nanosecond before he made contact with the Nomu. The world went white. The pain from his breaking bones vanished, replaced by a sensation he couldn't possibly comprehend. It felt like being connected to everything, everywhere, all at once. It was the feeling of a trillion atoms vibrating in unison, the rumble of galaxies spinning, the silent, relentless march of time itself, all flooding into his nervous system in a single, overwhelming instant. The two energies, the stockpiled green power of One for All and the infinite kinetic red gold of the Speed Force, collided within him. They didn't mix. They fused. A violent, elemental alchemy took place in his blood, his cells, his very soul. The green lightning that wreathed his body was instantly threaded with veins of gold and red, creating a chaotic, beautiful, and terrifying new aurora. His fist, now glowing with this impossible power, finally struck the Nomu. The result was not a smash. It was not a punch. It was an erasure. There was no sound, at first. Just a flash of blinding, polychromatic light. The Nomu's shock absorption was useless. It was designed to counter kinetic energy from within this universe. This energy was something else entirely. It didn't just hit the Nomu, it vibrated its very molecules into a state of chaotic disarray. The creature's body dissolved. Not into blood or gore, but into a fine, black dust that was instantly incinerated by the residual energy. The force of the impact continued outward. It hit all might, but it didn't feel like a punch. It felt like a gentle, irresistible push. The Nomu's grip on him vanished, and he was sent tumbling back, landing dazed but, for the first time in the fight, completely unharmed. The shockwave that followed was silent and strange. It wasn't air. It was reality itself rippling. Shigaraki and Kurogiri were thrown back, not by a physical force, but as if the space they occupied had been violently stretched and snapped back into place. And then, the sound returned. A deafening, universe-shattering crack boom that wasn't thunder, but the sound of a hole in reality being slammed shut. The USJ's glass dome, already damaged, exploded into a shower of diamond dust. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. All that was left was Izuku Midoriya, hanging in the air for a split second where the Nomu had been, his body limp. His arm, from the fingertips to the shoulder, was gone. Not mangled, not bloody. It had been sublimated, turned into the energy he had just unleashed. His legs were twisted into unnatural shapes, and his hero costume was scorched and tattered. The brilliant, multicolored lightning flickered and died, leaving only the faint, ominous green glow of One for All's embers. Then gravity remembered him. He fell to the ground with a soft, sickening thud, landing in a heap of broken limbs and unconsciousness. For a moment, no one moved. The remaining low-level villains were frozen in terror. Shigaraki was staring at his hands, then at the spot where his ultimate weapon had been, his mind utterly unable to process what had just happened. All Might, pushing himself to his feet, was the first to react. The steam was pouring off him, his muscle form flickering dangerously. He stared at the small, broken form of his successor, a maelstrom of emotions swirling in his chest, pride, horror, awe, and a deep, gut-wrenching terror. That power, that wasn't One for All. It was something more. Something alien. But before he could reach the boy, Izuku's body began to twitch. XXX. Consciousness was not a gentle return. It was a violent, chaotic assault. Izuku's first sensation was not pain. The physical damage to his body was so immense that his brain had simply shut off the signals. Instead, his first sensation was static. It was a sound, but not a sound. It was a feeling, but it had no texture. It was a low, constant hum that vibrated at the base of his skull, a billion discordant whispers all speaking at once, their words lost in a sea of white noise. It was the background radiation of 1,000 universes, and his mind was now the antenna. Run, Barry, run! Fastest man alive. Lightning gave me abs? I'm coming for you, Flash. Negative, negative, negative. Wally, you have to. The voices were sharp and then gone, flashes of thought and emotion from people he'd never met, in places he'd never seen. They were echoes in the current, and he was drowning in it. Then came the images. They weren't memories. They were seizures of the mind's eye. Flashes of impossible sights, seared onto the inside of his eyelids. A flash of scarlet and gold. A man, his face a blur of motion, running on water across an endless ocean. A city of impossible, crystalline towers gleaming under the light of a red sun. A man in a horrifyingly bright yellow suit, his eyes glowing with malevolent red light, vibrating with rage. He was laughing, a silent, terrible laugh that promised pain and paradox. A vast, cosmic treadmill, set against a backdrop of swirling nebulas and dying stars. A path to the beginning and end of time. A museum, filled with the trophies and memorabilia of a hero Izuku had never heard of. A scarlet-clad man with a lightning bolt on his chest. Each image lasted no more than a heartbeat, but they were burned into his brain with perfect, photographic clarity. They were alien and terrifying, fragments of a puzzle he didn't even know existed. He felt a profound sense of vertigo, the feeling of a man standing on a cliff's edge, suddenly realizing the cliff was a mile in the air, and there was no ground below. His own body felt wrong, detached. He could feel the shattered bones in his legs, the shredded muscle, the phantom void where his arm used to be. But beneath that, there was something else, a tingling, humming energy that was not the warm, familiar power of One for All. This was different. It was frantic, restless, eager. It felt like every cell in his body had been turned into a tiny engine, vibrating with a need for motion. He tried to open his eyes. The light of the USJ was blinding. The world seemed to be moving in a syrupy slow motion. He could see a single piece of glass from the shattered dome tumbling through the air, rotating with agonizing slowness. He could count the facets on its edge. He could see All Might, steam billowing from his body, taking a step towards him. The step took years. He saw the hero's mouth form a word, his name, but the sound was stretched out, a low, distorted bass rumble that seemed to last for an eternity. The sensory input was too much. The voices, the visions, the slowing of time. His mind was a circuit board with a nuclear reactor wired into it. It was frying him from the inside out. He managed a single, weak groan. His vocal cords felt sluggish, his tongue thick and uncooperative. He tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but his brain, desperately trying to make sense of the alien information flooding it, latched onto the clearest, most persistent echo it could find. A name that was spoken with reverence, with love, with desperation, by a dozen of the whispering voices. A name that felt, for some strange reason, like an anchor in this storm of static. Bibar-re. The word was a broken, confused puff of air. It held no meaning for him. It was just a sound his mouth made, a fragment of the universal chaos that now lived inside him. And then, mercifully, the static overwhelmed him. The world dissolved into white noise, and he fell into a darkness that felt like it was moving at the speed of light. XXX, Shigaraki Tamura stared. His usual manic energy, his childish petulance, was gone, replaced by a cold, unsettling stillness. The Nomu, his masterpiece, the key to breaking All Might and shattering the spirit of this hero-obsessed society, was gone. Not defeated. Not broken. It had ceased to exist. It had been unmade by a snot-nosed brat who had, moments before, been cowering behind a rock. "What was that?" he hissed, his voice a dry rasp of disbelief. "Kurogyri, what was that?" That wasn't in his file. Superhuman strength, results in catastrophic physical damage. That's what it said. It didn't say anything about reality-breaking explosions. Kurogyri's misty form swirled with agitation. "I do not know, Tamura Shigaraki. The energy reading was anomalous. It was not consistent with any quirk I have ever witnessed or have on record." Shigaraki began to scratch his neck, the gesture frantic, violent. "Cheat code. He used a cheat code. This is a broken game. A shitty, broken game." His eyes darted from the unconscious boy to the imposing figure of All Might, who was now ignoring them completely, his full attention on his student. The symbol of peace knelt beside Izuku, his hand hovering over the boy's back, afraid to touch him for fear of causing more damage. The sight of Izuku's missing arm sent a spike of ice through his heart. He had done this. He had passed his power onto this boy, a burden that was now, quite literally, tearing him apart. The sound of a heavy door being blown off its hinges echoed from the entrance. The pros had arrived. Snipe, Cementos, Ectoplasm, and Principal Niza, and behind them, the stoic, exhausted form of Shota Aizawa, his arm in a sling but his eyes burning with fury. Shigaraki saw them and let out a frustrated scream. Game over! Game over for now, All Might! But the final boss isn't beaten yet. We'll be back. And next time, I'll bring a better monster. Kurojiiri, understanding the signal, enveloped his master in his warp gate. Until we meet again, symbol of peace. The mist man's voice echoed, and then they were gone. The remaining villains, their leaders vanished and their trump card obliterated, surrendered immediately, their will to fight utterly shattered. All Might didn't even watch them go. He gently, carefully, gathered Izuku's broken body into his arms. The boy was terrifyingly light. As he stood up, his own body finally gave out. In a huge, theatrical plume of steam, the titan of a man deflated, reverting to his skeletal, true form. Toshinori Yagi stood there, cradling his successor, his blue eyes filled with a pain that went far beyond any physical wound. The other teachers rushed to his side. All Might! Are you alright? Cementos asked, his voice booming. Toshinori could only nod, his gaze fixed on the boy's face. Izuku was pale, his breathing shallow. But something strange was happening. Faint, thread-like lines of golden lightning, almost too quick to see, were dancing across his skin, zipping over his shattered legs and the cauterized stump of his shoulder. They looked like stitches made of pure light. What was that name he said? A quiet voice asked. Toshinori looked up. It was Azuri, her usual placid expression replaced with one of deep concern. She and Mineta had made their way over, their eyes glued to their unconscious classmate. Just before he passed out, she clarified. He said a name. Barry. Does anyone know a Barry? Toshinori shook his head. Delirium from the pain, young Azuri. He's gravely injured, he said the words, but a seed of doubt had been planted in his mind. The power he had witnessed felt ancient, primal. It was nothing like the contained, passed-down energy of One for All. It was wilder. Faster. It felt like he had just witnessed the gentle stream suddenly become a conduit for the entire ocean. He looked down at the boy in his arms. The boy who wanted to be a hero more than anything. The boy who had just unleashed a power that defied all known laws of their world to save him. The speed force had laid dormant for eons, its presence in this quirk-filled dimension a mere whisper, a background hum with no one to hear it. It was a current without a conductor, but today, a boy with a stockpiling quirk and a bottomless well of heroic spirit had screamed his desperation into the void, and the void had answered. Unseen by anyone, deep within Izuku's cells, the fusion was completing itself. The legacy of One for All was providing the furnace, and the infinite kinetic energy of the speed force was providing the fuel. A new engine was being forged, an engine that would one day move faster than light, faster than time, faster than thought itself. The static in his soul was quieting, but it wasn't gone. It was integrating, becoming a part of him. A spark had been struck, and now, a fire was beginning to burn, a fire that would reshape not just his destiny, but the very fabric of the multiverse. The race had begun, and Izuku Midoriya, the boy who was born without power, was now, unknowingly, at its absolute center. The first thing Izuku Midoriya became aware of was the relentless, antiseptic smell of astringent and clean linen. It was the signature scent of Recovery Girl's office, a place he was, to his unending shame, becoming intimately familiar with. The second thing he noticed was the profound lack of pain. This, in itself, was a terrifying anomaly. His last memory was of a supernova of agony, of bones turning to powder and an arm being atomized. He should have been a screaming, shattered wreck. Instead, he felt whole. He risked opening his eyes. The light was blessedly dim. He was lying in one of the infirmary beds, a crisp white sheet pulled up to his chest. He flexed the fingers on his left hand. They responded perfectly. Hesitantly, he lifted his right arm. It was there. His heart hammered against his ribs. He stared at it, turning the palm over and back. It was his arm. His hand. Complete with the small, faded scar on his knuckle from a childhood fall. It felt real. It felt like his own. But it couldn't be. He had seen it, felt it, disintegrate. Don't stare at it too hard, dearie. It might get shy and vanish again. The dry, sardonic voice of Chio Shizenji, recovery girl, cut through his confusion. He turned his head to see her sitting in her chair, peering at him over a stack of medical charts, her expression a mixture of her usual cantankerousness and something else, a deep, clinical bewilderment. Recovery girl. His voice was raspy. What happened? My arm. Yes, your arm, she said, setting the charts down with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of her entire career. Let's talk about your arm. And your legs, and the half-dozen ribs that were fractured, the ruptured spleen, and the grade 3 concussion. By all rights, you should be in a surgical theater for the next 48 hours, and in a full-body cast for the next 6 months. She stood up and walked over to his bed, her cane tapping a stern rhythm on the linoleum floor. She picked up his right arm, her touch surprisingly gentle, and began examining the skin. When they brought you in, this arm was gone. Not blown off, Midoriya. Gone. The stump was cauterized, but not by heat. It was as if the matter itself had been, neatly excised from reality. Your legs looked like sacks of broken glass. I did what I could. I kissed your forehead, activated my quirk to begin the healing process, and expected to drain your stamina for the better part of a week to knit you back together. She met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw a crack in her professional veneer. She looked completely and utterly baffled. But that's not what happened. My quirk started the process, yes, but your body, it hijacked it. It took that initial spark of cellular acceleration and amplified it 1,000-fold. We watched, All Might and I, as your bones reset themselves in minutes. Muscle tissue wove itself back together like a time-lapse video. And your arm. She shook her head, letting go of his wrist. It didn't heal. It regrew. Over the course of 3 hours it just came back. Every cell, every nerve, every freckle. It's a biological impossibility. It's not healing, it's regeneration on a level that makes a mockery of every medical text ever written. Izuku stared at his impossible arm. He could feel the blood pumping through it, the faint tingling of nerves that were, by all logic, brand new. But, one for all. I pushed it too far. You did more than that, boy, she said, her voice dropping to a serious, almost fearful tone. One for all breaks you. I know its signature. It's a destructive, overwhelming force that your body tears itself apart to contain. This was something else. While you were regenerating, your body was emitting a low-level bioelectric field I've never seen before. It wasn't green, like the energy you usually discharge. It was threaded with gold and red. It was vibrating at a frequency that shouldn't be possible for organic matter. The static. The memory of it returned, not as a sensory assault, but as a dull, lingering echo in the back of his mind. The whispers? The visions of a man in a yellow suit and a cosmic treadmill. I felt strange, Izuku admitted, his voice barely a whisper. When I hit the Nomu, there was a flash. And I heard things. Saw things. Before Recovery Girl could press him, the door to the infirmary opened. In walked Toshinori Yagi, looking even more skeletal and haunted than usual. He carried a small tray with a cup of tea, a peace offering that did little to mask the deep anxiety in his sunken eyes. He's awake, Toshinori stated, a wave of relief washing over his features. He gave Chio a grateful nod, and the elderly hero took her cue, gathering her charts. He's physically stable, Toshinori. Miraculously so, she said, pausing at the door. But I want him kept here for observation for at least another day. Whatever happened in that dome, it has fundamentally changed his physiology. We are in uncharted territory. She left, closing the door softly behind her, leaving mentor and successor in a heavy silence. Toshinori placed the tea on the bedside table. Young Midoriya. Izuku, he began, his voice strained. We need to talk about what happened. Izuku sat up, the sheet pooling in his lap. All Might. I'm so sorry. I was reckless. I saw you were in trouble and I moved without thinking. I broke our promise. Toshinori held up a hand, stopping the frantic apology. You were heroic, my boy. Reckless, yes. But undeniably heroic. You saved me. You defeated a creature that I was struggling to overcome. The admission cost him dearly. Izuku could see it in the clenching of his jaw. But that power, that was not the one for all I passed on to you. I know, Izuku said, looking down at his hands. It felt different. One for all is warm. It feels like a sun inside me, a power I have to carefully hold. This was cold. It felt like a river, a raging, infinite river that wasn't just inside me, but all around me. And for a second, I felt like I fell into it. Toshinori listened intently, his expression grim. The previous users. I have felt their echoes, their will. But never have I heard of such a thing. We believed one for all simply stockpiled raw power, but perhaps, in reaching its 9th generation, a new threshold has been crossed. A singularity. It may have unlocked a new, latent aspect of the quirk. It was a logical explanation. It was the only explanation that fit within their understanding of the world. But it didn't feel right to Izuku. This power hadn't felt like an evolution, it had felt like an invasion. An alien energy source had poured into him, and now, its residue was thrumming in his veins. Toshinori handed him the cup of tea. Your body seems to have adapted, to have healed the damage. But this new power is chaotic. Uncontrolled. We must be cautious. We must understand it before you even think of attempting to use it again. Izuku nodded, taking the cup. His hands were trembling slightly. As he looked down into the amber liquid, the world glitched. For no more than a second, everything stopped. The steam rising from the tea froze in midair, its delicate wisps becoming a motionless sculpture of vapor. The faint drip of a faucet across the room ceased. The motes of dust dancing in the sliver of sunlight from the window hung suspended, like stars in a photograph. The only thing that moved was him. He saw it all with perfect, preternatural clarity, and then, just as suddenly, reality snapped back into place. The steam continued its dance, the faucet dripped, the dust motes fell. The entire event had lasted less time than a single heartbeat. Izuku flinched, sloshing hot tea over his hand. Oh, young Midoriya? Are you all right? Toshinori asked, concerned. Fine. I'm fine, Izuku said quickly, putting the cup down. Just a muscle spasm. He stared at his hand. It wasn't a spasm. For a moment, he had felt completely detached from the flow of time. He dismissed it as a neurological side effect of his concussion. It had to be. The alternative was too strange to consider, but the feeling lingered. The sensation of standing still while the entire universe held its breath just for him. The echo of the static in his soul seemed to hum with a quiet, knowing satisfaction. XXX. 2 days later, Izuku was cleared to return to class. His miraculous recovery was the talk of the UA staff, officially explained away as a previously unknown synergistic effect between Midoriya's quirk and recovery girls. It was a flimsy, paper-thin explanation, but it was the only one they had. His missing arm, witnessed by only a handful of people, was dismissed as a stress-induced misperception in the heat of battle. Walking back into classroom 1A was surreal. He was met with a wave of relief and concern from his classmates. Midoriya! You're okay! Achiko Uraraka said, her round face alight with genuine happiness. Your actions at the USJ were the epitome of heroic self-sacrifice, though incredibly reckless. Tenya Ida added, his hands chopping the air with his usual rigid precision. We are all glad to see you have made a full recovery. Izuku offered a weak smile, overwhelmed by their kindness. Thanks, everyone. I'm fine. Really, he wasn't fine. The world felt wrong. The edges were too sharp, the sounds too clear. The low, buzzing static was a constant companion now, a faint tinnitus that spiked whenever he felt a strong emotion. He felt disconnected, like he was watching his life through a pane of glass. He was terrified of his own body, of the alien power that had taken up residence within him. He hadn't dared to try and access One for All, afraid of what might happen if he opened the floodgates to that raging river again. He took his seat, the familiar wood grain of his desk a small comfort. Mr. Aizawa, his arms now completely encased in casts, addressed the class, his voice a tired monotone. He spoke of the upcoming UA Sports Festival, of the need to show the world that they were not afraid. Izuku tried to focus, to take notes as he always did. But the static was louder today. The whispers were at the edge of his hearing, indistinct and maddening. Speed is the key. Vibrational frequency. Don't be late, kid. He gripped his pen tighter, trying to ground himself. He rested his head in his left hand, his right hand fidgeting on the surface of his desk, his fingers tapping an anxious, frantic rhythm. The buzzing in his skull intensified, synchronizing with the tapping of his fingers. He felt a strange tingling sensation spread through his hand, a feeling like pins and needles, but colder. He was lost in a memory of the USJ, the flash of light, the feeling of omnipotence, the horrifying void where his arm had been, when a soft gasp from next to him broke his concentration. It was Tsuyu Ajiri. Midoriya, Karo, your hand, she whispered, her large eyes wider than usual. Izuku blinked and looked down, his breath caught in his throat. His fingers, from the second knuckle down, were gone. They weren't missing, they were submerged in his desk, the solid wood rippling around them as if it were water. He could feel the dense, fibrous texture of the oak, not against his skin, but through it, a bizarre and violating sensation of non-existence. His hand was vibrating at an incredible, visible speed, blurring at the edges. A wave of pure, ice-cold panic washed over him. He yanked his hand back with a strangled yelp. It came free with a soundless hump, like pulling a spoon from a jar of honey. For a split second, he saw the wood of the desk was whole and unmarked. There was no hole, no damage. It was as if his hand had never been there. The class turned to look at him. Is there a problem, Midoriya? Mr. Aizawa's tired voice cut through the air. And no! Nothing, sensei! Izuku stammered, shoving his tingling, vibrating hand under the desk, out of sight. His heart was trying to beat its way out of his chest. He could feel the stares of his classmates. He had just phased his hand through solid matter. It was impossible. It wasn't a feature of One for All. It was another glitch. A terrifying, uncontrollable glitch. For the rest of the day, he kept his hands clenched into fists in his lap, terrified it would happen again. He felt like a stranger in his own skin. The power inside him was not a tool he could learn to wield. It was a ghost in the machine, and it was starting to pull the levers. The sense of isolation was crushing. How could he explain this to anyone? He sounded insane. He was a freak again, just like he had been before he met All Might, but this time, the reason wasn't a lack of power, but an abundance of something terrifying and unknown. That night, sleep offered no escape. His dreams were a chaotic storm of red and gold lightning. And through the storm, he saw him again. The running man. This time, the image was clearer, less fleeting. The man had a shock of bright, fiery red hair and a face that was open and kind, but etched with an expression of profound urgency. His eyes, the same vibrant green as Izuku's own, were locked onto him. He wore a suit of brilliant crimson, a stylized, open-topped cowl framing his face. A jagged, golden lightning bolt was emblazoned on his chest. He was running, but not on any surface Izuku could recognize. He was running through the kaleidoscopic, non-space of the storm itself, and he was running directly towards him. He opened his mouth to speak, but his words were lost in the roar of the dimensional winds, a silent plea that Izuku couldn't decipher. Izuku woke up in a cold sweat, his heart racing. He knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that the man in his dreams was real. He was connected to this new power. And he was trying to reach him. XXX, we have to test it. We have to know what we're dealing with. Toshinori's words hung in the air of UA's massive indoor training facility, Gamma Gym. 2 days had passed since the phasing incident, an event Izuku had confessed to his mentor in a panicked, rambling phone call. The fear had been mounting, and they both knew they could no longer ignore it. All Might, I'm scared, Izuku admitted, his voice small in the cavernous space. He was in his gym uniform, but he felt as exposed as if he were naked. I can't control it. It just happens. The time slowing, the phasing. The other day, I was trying to dodge a ball in gym class and I ended up on the other side of the room. I don't remember moving. It felt like I just blinked. Toshinori placed a comforting, bony hand on his shoulder. I know you're scared, my boy. To be honest, so am I. This is beyond my experience. But fear is the enemy of progress. We cannot master what we do not understand. Today, we will not push your limits. We will simply observe. I want you to try and call upon one for all. Just a small amount. Let's see what happens in a controlled environment. Izuku took a deep breath, his stomach churning. He nodded. He stood in the center of the gym, the wide open space feeling both freeing and intimidating. He closed his eyes, reaching inward for that familiar, warm sun of one for all. He found it, but it was different now. It was no longer a placid star. It was a raging furnace, and swirling around it, intertwined with it, was the cold, frantic energy of the river. He couldn't access one without touching the other. Okay, he whispered to himself. Just 1%. Full cowling, he focused, drawing the power up. The familiar red lines traced their way across his skin, but they were instantly accompanied by flickering, unpredictable arcs of golden red lightning. The energy felt spiky, chaotic. The air around him crackled, and the scent of ozone, the smell of a coming thunderstorm, filled the gym. Good, young Midoriya! You're containing it! Toshinori called out from a safe distance, but Izuku wasn't containing it. He was barely holding on. The static in his head roared to life, the billion whispers becoming a single, deafening shout that had only one word, run. I'm going to try to move, Izuku said through gritted teeth, the energy desperate to be released. Just a short burst. Across the floor. Easy does it, Toshinori cautioned. Izuku coiled his legs and pushed off. The world ceased to exist. There was no sensation of movement. No rush of wind, no feeling of his feet hitting the ground. One moment, he was on one side of the vast gym, coiling to spring. The next, he was standing perfectly still on the opposite side, gently touching the far wall. A disorienting wave of vertigo washed over him. His brain was screaming that something was wrong. There was a gap. A piece of his life, only a few seconds long, had been neatly snipped out of existence. He looked at his hands, then back across the gym at Toshinori. He had no memory of the journey. None. It was a terrifying, complete blackout. Toshinori, however, had seen it all. And what he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. From his perspective, Izuku didn't run. He didn't blur. For a single, terrifying instant, the boy's eyes had glazed over, and the lightning around him had flared from green gold red to a blinding, pure white. And then, Izuku had simply vanished. Not moved fast. He had ceased to be in one location and had simultaneously begun to exist in another. There was no streak of light, no sonic boom, just a quiet, physics-defying act of teleportation. A split second later, the displaced air from his original position rushed in to fill the vacuum, creating a thunderous crack that echoed through the gym like a gunshot. Toshinori stared, his mouth agape, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossibility of what he had just witnessed. He had fought villains who could teleport. He knew what it looked like. This was not that. This was something else. This was as if the boy had treated the three-dimensional space between 2 points as an irrelevant suggestion. Young Midoriya. Toshinori's voice was a choked whisper, all pretense of the calm mentor gone. What did you do? Izuku turned, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. I don't know, he cried out, his voice cracking. I just wanted to run. But I didn't. I was here, and then I was there. I don't remember any of it. All Might, what is happening to me? The terror in his voice was absolute. This wasn't a quirk. This was a curse. A malevolent force was puppeteering his body, stealing his time, and rewriting the laws of physics around him without his consent. He stumbled backwards, his legs feeling like they belonged to someone else, until his back hit the wall. He slid down to the floor, pulling his knees to his chest, his whole body trembling. Toshinori rushed to his side, his long legs covering the distance in seconds. He knelt before his student, his heart breaking at the sight of the boy's utter despair. He had wanted to give him hope, a chance to be a hero. He had never imagined he would be handing him a power that would make him fear his own shadow. "It's okay, my boy. It's okay. We'll figure this out together," Toshinori said, his voice regaining a fraction of its reassuring strength. But even as he spoke the words, Izuku wasn't listening. His gaze was fixed on the empty space in front of him, his eyes unfocused. The static in his head, which had been a chaotic roar, suddenly fell silent. The billion whispers died away, and a single image, a single presence, pushed its way to the forefront of his consciousness with stunning, undeniable clarity. The man from his dreams was there. He wasn't physically in the room, but the vision was so powerful, so HD, that he might as well have been. The red-haired speedster in the crimson suit was running, an endless, desperate marathon through a storm of lightning. But this time, the storm was receding around him, allowing Izuku to see him perfectly. His green eyes, so like Izuku's own, were filled not with panic, but with a fierce, burning determination. He was older than Izuku, maybe in his early 20s, his face carrying the lines of someone who had seen too much, run too far. He looked exhausted, but he never slowed. And as he ran, his mouth moved, and this time, Izuku heard the words. They weren't spoken in his ears, but bloomed directly in his mind, a telepathic message carried across an impossible distance. "I'm coming. It's tearing a hole. Your power, it's a beacon. He can feel it. He's hunting me, but he'll find you soon. You have to learn to control it. You have to learn the rules. You have to learn how to run." The vision flickered. Behind the running man, a shadow detached itself from the storm. It was a skeletal, horrifying figure, wreathed in black and negative light, its form a mockery of a speedster's. It was death. The concept of death for runners like him, and it was gaining. The red-haired man glanced over his shoulder at the pursuing darkness, and then his gaze snapped back to Izuku, the urgency in his eyes intensifying 100-fold. "My name is Wally West. I am the fastest man alive. But you're something else. Hold on, kid. I'm almost there." The vision shattered. Izuku gasped, collapsing forward into Toshinori's arms, his body racked with shudders. "The man," he choked out, his voice hoarse with shock. "The man in the storm, he spoke to me. He's coming," he said. "He said something else is coming too." Toshinori held his successor, a cold dread seeping into his bones. They were not dealing with a quirk singularity. They had, in a desperate act of heroism, kicked a hole in the wall of their own reality. And now, something from the other side was starting to crawl through. They were no longer in uncharted territory. They were lost in a vast, unknown, and terrifying new multiverse, and they were utterly, completely alone. The concept of a finish line had ceased to have meaning for Wally West. For days, or weeks, or maybe even centuries, time lost all coherence in the churning vortex of the speed force. He had been running, not towards a destination, but away from a finality. It was a race he had run before, a grim and terrible marathon against the one opponent no speedster could ever truly outpace. The black flash, death itself, tailored for those who moved between the ticks of a second. Usually, he could lose it. He could phase through a dimension, hide in the time stream, or simply push his speed past the point where the cosmic predator could follow. But this time was different. The hunter was relentless, its focus absolute. It wasn't just chasing him. It was being drawn by something. Wally could feel it, a strange, new resonance in the speed force, a thrumming, powerful vibration that had never existed before. It was like a powerful lighthouse had been ignited in a previously dark corner of the multiverse, and its chaotic, overwhelmingly bright light was not only guiding him but also acting as a giant, unmissable beacon for the creature hot on his heels. He'd caught glimpses of the source. Flashes of a boy with wild green hair and eyes that mirrored his own. A boy wreathed in a bizarre fusion of energies, a power that felt both familiar and terrifyingly alien. This boy wasn't just tapping into the speed force. He was a black hole, sucking it in, merging with it, and in the process, generating a gravitational pull that was warping the very fabric of their shared energy source. The kid was a paradox, a cosmic anomaly of incredible power, and he had no idea he was screaming his existence across every dimension. Hold on, kid. I'm almost there, Wally projected, pushing his mind through the dimensional static, a desperate telepathic message. He felt a flicker of connection, a brief moment of shocked reception from the boy's end. Good. At least he knew he wasn't just shouting into the void. The black flash shrieked behind him, a soundless terror in reality. It was closing the distance. The strange lighthouse dimension was pulling on Wally, a gentle but insistent tug, offering a potential sanctuary. But it was also the epicenter of the disturbance. Going there was like a moth flying not just to a flame, but to the heart of the sun. The black flash would follow. There was no doubt. But what choice did he have? To stay in the Speed Force was to be caught and erased. To run to any other Earth was to lead death to a world full of people he knew, people he loved. This new world, this source of the anomaly, it was unknown. Uncharted. A desperate gambit. Okay, Barry. I hope you taught me enough. He focused on the pull, on the vision of the green-haired boy. Instead of fighting the current, he let it take him. He angled his body, shifting his vibrational frequency to match the unique signature of the boy's reality. The world of red and gold lightning around him began to warp and distort. The familiar currents of the Speed Force fought against him, trying to keep him within its boundaries, but the pull of the new anchor was too strong. It felt like being ripped apart and put back together in the wrong order. A violent, gut-wrenching shunt through a wall that was never meant to be breached. The kaleidoscopic colors of the Speed Force collapsed into a single point of blinding white light, and then, with a sound like a cosmic circuit breaker tripping, Wally West was thrown out of the race. He crashed into reality with all the grace of a dropped anvil. He tumbled head over heels onto rough asphalt, his momentum carrying him for 100 yards in a shower of sparks and shredded concrete. His friction-proof aura protected him from being skinned alive, but the violent transition had left him dizzy and disoriented. He came to a skidding halt in the middle of a street, his crimson suit smoking slightly from the atmospheric entry. For a moment, he just lay there, gasping in air that felt thick and strangely clean. He pushed himself up onto his elbows. The world swam into focus. He was in a city. Tall, gleaming buildings of glass and steel surrounded him, but they were interspersed with more traditional, smaller structures of wood and tile. The architecture was eclectic. Unfamiliar. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The biggest shock was the language. The signs on the storefronts, the advertisements on the sides of the strangely shaped buses. It was all in Japanese. Okay, Wally, he muttered to himself, his voice raspy. Definitely not Keystone. Or Central City. Or Kansas, for that matter. He stood up, brushing dust from his suit. People were starting to notice him. Pedestrians were stopping, their eyes widening, their mouths agape. They were pointing, pulling out strange, futuristic-looking phones. He was used to being recognized, but this was different. They weren't looking at him with the familiar awe of seeing a superhero. They were looking at him like they had just seen a unicorn wander into a board meeting. Utter, uncomprehending shock. He needed to get off the street. He needed to find the kid. The beacon. His connection to the Speed Force was flickering, unstable, like a radio tuned to a distant station. But he could still feel the pull, the source of that powerful resonance. It was close. Very close. It felt like a giant electromagnet, and every particle in his body was a piece of iron being drawn toward it. He pinpointed the direction. It was a large complex of buildings, almost like a university campus, situated on a nearby hill. A giant gate with the letters UA stood at its entrance. Right. No time to waste. He focused, pulling on the dregs of his speed. The world didn't slow to a crawl like it usually did. It just got a little sluggish. His powers were severely dampened here, cut off from their primary source. Still, even at 10%, he was faster than anything on this planet. To the gawking bystanders, he simply vanished. One moment, the strange man in the red suit was standing in the middle of the road. The next, he was gone, leaving behind nothing but a faint gust of wind and the smell of ozone. XXX. The Gamma Gym felt less like a training facility and more like a tomb. An hour had passed since Izuku's vision, An hour filled with a failed attempt by Toshinori to comfort a boy who was now grappling with threats beyond the scope of heroes and villains. The concepts were too vast, too alien. A multiverse. A speed force. A man named Wally West running from a creature that was death itself. It was the stuff of comic books, not real life. And yet, the memory of the vision was burned into his mind with perfect clarity. The fear was a cold, solid knot in his stomach. This Wally West was coming for him. And so was the skeletal shadow. "We need to tell someone," Izuku said, his voice hoarse from a combination of shock and panicked rambling. "Principal Nizu, at least. This is bigger than just a quirk." Toshinori, who had been pacing a trench into the gym floor, stopped. "And what do we tell him, young Midoriya? That you've been having psychic visions of a man from another dimension? That you believe you're a beacon for a cosmic death entity? They'll think you've gone mad. They'll think your new power has fractured your mind. No. We keep this to ourselves for now. Until we have proof. Until we understand more." "But he said he was coming. He said he was close." "It was a vision, a dream," Toshinori said, though his words lacked any real conviction. He was trying to ground them both in their reality, a reality that was rapidly dissolving around them. It could be a hallucination brought on by the energy. As if on cue, the energy inside Izuku began to stir. The static in his head, which had been quiet since the vision, returned with a vengeance. It wasn't the chaotic chorus of whispers from before. It was a single, clear frequency, getting stronger by the second, like a radio tuning into a powerful signal. It was a homing beacon, and something was locking onto it. A strange tingling sensation spread through Izuku's body. The golden red lightning, the energy he now associated with the river, began to arc across his skin, unbidden. It wasn't the furious, uncontrolled torrent from before, but a series of faint, nervous sparks. "All might," Izuku whispered, standing up, his eyes wide. "Something's happening. I can feel him." Toshinori's eyes widened. "Feel him? What do you mean?" "The man from the dream. Wally," Izuku said, his head turning instinctively toward the gym's reinforced metal doors. "He's here." Toshinori stared at the doors, a flicker of his old all-might bravado returning. He drew himself up, ready for a fight. "Stay behind me, my boy." The air in the gym grew thick, heavy with the smell of ozone. The lights flickered. A low hum vibrated through the floor, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. And then, there was a gust of wind, a sudden, inexplicable breeze that rustled their hair and clothes, and a man was standing in front of them. He hadn't come through the doors. He hadn't teleported in a flash of light. He had just arrived between one moment and the next. He was tall and lean, with a runner's build, clad in a suit of the most brilliant crimson Izuku had ever seen. A golden lightning bolt, almost identical to the one All Might wore but with a sharper, more aggressive design, was emblazoned on his chest. His cowl was open at the top, revealing a shock of fiery red hair, and his face, though partially obscured, held an expression of weary relief. His green eyes, so startlingly familiar from the vision, locked onto Izuku. It was him. The man from the storm. Wally West. For a long moment, no one moved. The tableau was frozen, the impossible visitor, the skeletal hero, and the terrified boy who was the reason for it all. Wally took a slow breath, his senses adjusting. The kid was right here. The source of the beacon. The power rolling off him was staggering, a chaotic, untamed storm of kinetic potential. It was like standing next to a nuclear reactor with the shielding stripped off. And intertwined with it was another energy, something warm and powerful, like a miniature sun. "You're real," Izuku breathed, the words escaping him in a puff of disbelief. Wally gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah, kid. I'm real. Name's Wally West. You must be the one causing all the ruckus in the neighborhood." His voice was American, laced with an easygoing charm that seemed utterly at odds with the impossible situation. Toshinori stepped forward, placing himself protectively between Wally and Izuku. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" he demanded, his voice low and threatening. Wally's eyes shifted to Toshinori. He took in the skeletal frame, the sunken eyes, the sheer, indomitable will that burned within them. He could feel the power simmering inside the man, a faded, but still potent, echo of the same energy he felt in the boy. Whoa, easy there, Gandalf. I'm one of the good guys, he said, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. As for how I got in here, let's just say I took the scenic route. That is not an answer, Toshinori pressed. It's the only one you're gonna get right now that won't make your brain melt, Wally retorted, his gaze snapping back to Izuku. Listen, kid. We don't have a lot of time. Your power, whatever it is, it tore a hole in the wall between our worlds. You're a beacon, and you've attracted some very nasty, very fast attention. As he spoke, the faint, golden-red lightning around Izuku began to flare up again, reacting to Wally's proximity. The two sources of speed force energy were resonating with each other, creating a feedback loop. Izuku cried out, clutching his head as the static roared, louder than it had ever been. The lights in the gym didn't just flicker now, they exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the vast room into the dim, gray light of the late afternoon filtering through the high windows. No, kid, don't panic, Wally said, his easygoing demeanor vanishing, replaced by urgent concern. You have to calm down. You're generating a feedback loop. You're going to overload. But Izuku couldn't hear him. The power was surging, a tidal wave of kinetic energy with no outlet. His body began to vibrate, the edges of his form blurring into a transparent haze. Objects near him, training weights, spare equipment, began to levitate, caught in the chaotic gravitational field he was generating. Young Midoriya! Toshinori yelled, reaching for him, but a visible barrier of distorted air shimmered around the boy, repelling his hand with a sharp shock. Wally knew what was about to happen. He'd seen it happen to rookies before. An uncontrolled release. A kinetic explosion that could level the entire building. There was only one way to stop it. Don't fight me! Wally yelled, and then he moved. He wasn't as fast as he should have been, but he was still fast enough. He closed the distance in the span of a single heartbeat, his body phasing into a state of intangibility. He passed through Toshinori's defensive stance like a ghost, and plunged his hands into Izuku's chest. For Izuku, the sensation was indescribable. It wasn't cold or painful. It was a feeling of absolute stillness, of his own frantic, vibrating energy being met and calmed by a perfectly tuned, perfectly controlled counterfrequency. He felt Wally's hands not on his skin, but inside his very soul, gripping the raging storm within him and gently, but firmly, coaxing it into a state of calm. Wally's own lightning, a controlled, brilliant gold, flowed from his hands into Izuku, not adding to the chaos, but acting as a stabilizer. It was the touch of a master, a speedster who had spent a lifetime learning to command the very energy that was about to tear Izuku apart. The untamed lightning around Izuku receded. His body solidified. The levitating objects clattered to the floor. The static in his head died down to a manageable hum. He collapsed, his legs giving out, but Wally caught him, holding him steady. Izuku looked up, gasping for breath, into the concerned green eyes of the man from another world. Wally let out a slow, shaky breath. Okay, crisis averted. See? We're good. Just try not to explode again for the next 5 minutes, would you? I'm still jet-lagged. He helped Izuku to his feet. Toshinori stood frozen a few feet away, his mind reeling. He had just witnessed this stranger phase through him and then neutralize a power surge that had felt, to him, like the precursor to a nuclear detonation. Every instinct he had screamed that this man was a threat, but he had just saved his student's life. Wally finally let go of Izuku, taking a step back. He looked from the boy to the skeletal man and back again, a look of profound, dawning horror on his face. He had felt it when he touched the kid, the two energies. One was the wild, chaotic torrent of the speed force, raw and untamed. The other was that warm, sun-like power, passed from the older man to the boy, a legacy of stockpiled strength. And they weren't just coexisting. They were bonding. Fusing at a molecular, conceptual level. Oh man, Wally breathed, running a hand through his red hair, his expression one of utter disbelief. Oh, this is bad. This is really, really bad. What? Izuku asked, his voice trembling. What's bad? Wally pointed a shaky finger, alternating between Izuku and Toshinori. You, and you. Your powers. The one you gave him, he said to Tashinori, and the one he stole, I guess? From my universe. Stole? Tashinori bristled. That power is a part of my student's quirk. A quirk? Is that what you call it? Wally scoffed, a note of hysteria creeping into his voice. Lady, that's not a quirk. That's the speed force. It's the cosmic engine of motion, of time, of reality itself. It's not something you're supposed to be able to just plug into a genetic superpower. They're not supposed to mix. He began to pace, his movements tight and agitated. I don't know how you did it, kid, but when you tore that hole, you didn't just borrow some of its energy. You made a permanent connection. The speed force is pouring into you, and your quirk, it's not just holding it. It's feeding it. It's acting like a supercharger, a power source. You're not just a conduit for the speed force. You're becoming a generator for it. The implications of what he was saying began to dawn on Izuku. The stockpiling nature of One for All. It wasn't just storing kinetic energy. It was amplifying it and pumping it back into the river, strengthening the very cosmic force it was drawing from. Wally stopped pacing and stared at Izuku, his eyes wide with a terrible realization. That's why, he whispered, a look of horrified awe on his face. That's why you're a beacon. That's why the Black Flash is so focused on this reality. It's the Speed Force's immune system, its predator. It hunts down and eliminates speedsters who mess with the timeline, who grow too powerful, who threaten its stability. But you're not just a threat to its stability. You are fundamentally rewriting its rules. To the Black Flash, you're not just a disease. You're a cosmic-level paradox. A cancer. He looked at Izuku, not with anger or jealousy, but with a profound, terrifying pity. It's not going to stop hunting you, kid, Wally said, his voice dropping to a grim, serious whisper. Ever. And the stronger you get, the harder it will come for you. In the oppressive silence of the ruined gym, Izuku Midoriya finally understood. His dream of being a hero had come true in the most twisted, terrifying way imaginable. He had the power to save people, but that same power had painted a target on his back for the Grim Reaper of the multiverse. His greatest gift was also his death sentence, and the strange man standing before him, the fastest man alive, was not just a mentor or a guide. He was a harbinger, a fellow condemned man who had run all the way from another universe just to deliver the news. The race was on, and Izuku had been entered against his will. The revelation hung in the air of the Gamma Gym, heavy and suffocating as a shroud. A cancer. A paradox. A death sentence delivered by a man who moved like a ghost and spoke of cosmic forces as casually as one might discuss the weather. For Izuku Midoriya, the world had once again tilted on its axis, the familiar ground of heroes, villains, and quirks crumbling away to reveal a terrifying, infinite abyss beneath. Tashinori Yagi was the first to break the silence. His skeletal frame, which had been rigid with suspicion, seemed to sag, the weight of this new, impossible reality crushing him. This Black Flash, he began, his voice raspy, is it a person? A villain we can fight? Wally let out a short, humorless laugh that held no mirth. Fight it? You can't fight a hurricane. You can't punch a plague. The Black Flash isn't a who, it's a what. It's an event. It's the Speed Force's way of saying your time is up. It's the embodiment of finality for people like me, and now for him. He gestured to Izuku, who was still staring at him, his face a pale mask of shock. But why me? Izuku finally whispered, the question a fragile thread in the oppressive silence. I just wanted to save him. Wally's expression softened, the grim harbinger giving way to a weary veteran who had seen too much. I know, kid. And that's the whole problem. The Speed Force. It's not just an energy source. It's a semi-sentient, conceptual force. It responds to things. Heroism. Sacrifice. Willpower. When you push your quirk, you put out a signal of pure, undiluted heroic intent on a frequency it had never encountered before. It saw a perfect vessel, but when it connected to you, it found your one for all. It's like pouring water into a glass and finding out the glass is actually a sponge that's also a spring. and it just keeps absorbing and expanding and pushing back more water than you poured in. It's a paradox. And the Speed Force hates paradoxes. He walked over and clapped a hand on Izuku's shoulder. The touch was grounding, surprisingly solid. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. You're still here, aren't you? It hasn't caught you yet. That means we have time. Not a lot, but some. And the only way to beat a hunter is to be faster, smarter, and better than it is. And you can teach him? Tashinori asked, a sliver of hope in his voice. You can teach him to control this. Speed Force? Teach him? I'm gonna have to, Wally said, his easygoing bravado making a tentative return. Because right now, he's a toddler driving a Formula One car. It's a miracle he hasn't vaporized this whole hemisphere. We need a safe place. Somewhere out of the way, where he can cut loose without breaking a continent. The mention of a safe place jogged Tashinori out of his stupor. There was one person at UA who was equipped to handle the truly bizarre, the existentially threatening. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over a contact. I may know just the place. And the person we need to bring into this. He paused, looking at Wally. But first. I need your word. You are here to help him. Only to help him. Wally met the former number one hero's gaze, and for a moment, the two men understood each other perfectly. They were both mentors, guardians of a legacy, who had found themselves responsible for a boy with a power that could save the world or shatter it. I'm the fastest man alive, Wally said, his voice quiet but firm. My whole life has been about running toward trouble to help people. This kid, he's the biggest trouble in the entire multiverse. Where else would I be? That was enough for Tashinori. He made the call. XXX. Principal Nizu, as it turned out, handled the news of an extra-dimensional refugee, a cosmic death entity, and his star pupil's reality-breaking power with an unnerving, almost cheerful, equanimity. He sat behind his desk, pouring tea for the three of them, a creature who might be a bear or a mouse, a skeletal man, and a man in a crimson supersuit, as if this were a standard parent-teacher conference. Fascinating, Nizu said, his black eyes twinkling with intellectual glee after Tashinori and Wally had given him the condensed, terrifying version of events. The M theory of brain worlds has always been a pet interest of mine, but to have it confirmed so dramatically. The energy signatures I detected during the USJ incident make a great deal more sense now. I had attributed them to a potential quark singularity. But this is infinitely more elegant. We need a secure location, Principal, Tashinori interjected, trying to steer the conversation back to the immediate danger. A place where young Midoriya can train this new ability without endangering the student body. Of course, Nizu said, taking a thoughtful sip of his tea. He tapped a few keys on his computer. A holographic map of the UA campus appeared above his desk. He zoomed in on a section far from the main school building, a massive, windowless cube of black concrete. Training Ground Omega. It was constructed as a bunker to withstand a direct hit from a full-power All Might. The walls are composed of a carbon nanofiber reinforced alloy, 20 meters thick, and the entire structure is suspended on a seismic dampening gyroscopic platform. It's completely isolated from the rest of the campus. Whatever kinetic or dimensional shenanigans young Midoriya gets up to in there, they will not be felt by the outside world. He looked at Wally. Mr. West. Your cooperation is, of course, invaluable. Yui would be honored to provide you with temporary lodging and any resources you might require. In exchange, I expect a full briefing on the nature of this Speed Force and its potential ramifications for our reality. I'll have Power Loader begin work on a device to analyze its energy signature immediately. Wally just blinked. This whole school is run by a talking teddy bear super genius, isn't it? He muttered to Izuku under his breath. Izuku, still reeling, could only nod mutely. XXX. Training Ground Omega was less of a gym and more of a void. The interior was a perfect cube, 100 meters on each side, the walls, floor, and ceiling all made of the same seamless, non-reflective black material. There were no lights, the space illuminated by floating, self-powered orbs that cast a sterile, shadowless white glow. It was a place outside of place, designed for absolute containment. Izuku stood in the center, feeling small and terribly exposed. Wally stood opposite him, his crimson suit a stark splash of color in the monochrome emptiness. Tashinori and Nizu observed from a shielded, reinforced booth set into one of the walls. "Alright, kid. Welcome to Speedster 101, Wally began, his tone shifting from weary traveler to focused teacher. "First lesson, you're thinking about your power all wrong. You've been treating it like a tank of gas. Something you use and it runs out. That's not how it works. The speed force is an ocean, and you're standing in the middle of it. It's everywhere. You don't have to pull it into you. You just have to let it flow through you." "I don't know how," Izuku said honestly. "When I try to use one for all, it just comes along for the ride. I can't separate them." "Good," Wally said, a surprising answer. "Don't. The fusion, the paradox, that's your strength. Your one for all is the engine, the speed force is the fuel. You need to learn how to work the clutch. Right now, you're just slamming your foot on the gas and redlining it every time. We're going to start small. Incredibly small. We're going to learn about vibration." He held up his hand. "Every object in the universe, right down to the atoms, is vibrating at a specific frequency. The speed force gives you conscious control over the vibration of your own molecules. Match the frequency of the air." Wally's hand blurred, becoming transparent, "and you can turn intangible. A ghost." His hand solidified. "Match the frequency of a solid object." His hand blurred again, "and you can pass right through it." He pointed to a large, solid block of concrete that Cementos had created for them in a corner of the room. "I want you to walk over there. And I want you to put your hand through it." Izuku stared at the block, then at his own hand. "But how? What do I do?" "Don't think. Feel," Wally instructed. "Feel that hum? That static in your head? That's it. That's the sound of the speed force. Listen to it. Feel the vibration in your cells. Now focus on your hand. Tell your molecules to move faster. To buzz. Like a tuning fork." Izuku closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He tried to shut out the overwhelming fear and focus on the sensation Wally described. He found it. That internal, restless hum. He isolated it, focusing all his willpower on his right hand. He imagined the trillions of cells that made up his fingers, his palm, his wrist, all beginning to vibrate in unison, a chorus of infinitesimal motion. Faint, golden sparks began to dance around his fingertips. "There you go," Wally encouraged, his voice low and steady. "You feel that? That tingle? That's the speed force waking up. Now faster. Make it buzz so fast it blurs." Izuku gritted his teeth, pouring more concentration into it. The tingling intensified, becoming a powerful, buzzing sensation, like he'd plunged his arm into an electric current. He opened his eyes. His hand was visibly vibrating, the edges blurring into a transparent haze, just as it had in the classroom. But this time, it wasn't a terrifying, uncontrolled glitch. It was intentional. He was doing it. "Okay," he breathed, a flicker of excitement cutting through his fear. "Now walk to the block." Slowly, Wally coached. "Keep the focus. Don't let the vibration stop. Just touch it." Izuku walked forward, his eyes locked on his shimmering hand. He felt like he was carrying a bomb. He reached the concrete block, its rough, gray surface solid and imposing. He hesitated, the primal part of his brain screaming that this was impossible, that he was about to break every bone in his hand. "Don't think about the block. Think about the space between the atoms of the block," Wally said, his voice seeming to come from right beside him, though he hadn't moved. "You're not breaking through it. You're just ignoring it. Find the empty spaces. Let your hand slip through." Izuku took another shaky breath and pushed his hand forward. The sensation was utterly alien. There was a moment of resistance, a strange, jelly-like pressure, and then, nothing. His fingers sank into the concrete. Then his palm. Then his wrist. There was no pain, no impact. Just a cold, gritty feeling, as if his hand was submerged in a thick, vibrating sludge. He could feel the internal structure of the concrete, the gravel, the sand, the rebar, all passing harmlessly through his own matter. He gasped, pulling his hand back instinctively. It came free with a faint swoop sound, perfectly intact, still buzzing with energy. He stared at it, then at the completely solid, undamaged block. A wide, disbelieving grin spread across his face. I did it. From the observation booth, Toshinori watched, his mouth agape. Mizu, however, was practically vibrating with excitement, his paws typing furiously on a console. Incredible! A controlled quantum tunneling event. The applications are staggering. He's not just breaking the laws of physics, he's politely asking them to step aside. Wally nodded, a genuine smile on his face for the first time. Not bad, kid. Not bad at all. Took me 3 months to do that without giving myself a nosebleed. You did it in 5 minutes. Izuku looked up, his grin faltering. Really? Why was it so easy for me? Wally's smile faded slightly. That's the other side of the coin. The fusion. Your quirk doesn't just stockpile power, it seems to stockpile experience. Every ounce of knowledge, every technique the Speed Force holds, you absorb it like a sponge. You have the potential to master this stuff at a rate that shouldn't be possible. He paused, his expression turning serious. That's good, because we're on a very tight schedule. It also means you'll reach dangerous new levels of power much faster than anyone ever has, which will make you an even brighter beacon for the Black Flash. The mention of the name sobered Izuku instantly. The small victory suddenly felt hollow, just another step on a path toward an inevitable, terrifying confrontation. What's next? Izuku asked, his voice now grimly determined. Next, Wally said, a glint in his eye, we learn how to properly use your speed. No more accidental teleporting. We're going to learn about friction. He led Izuku to the center of the vast room. When a speedster runs, they generate an aura, a protective bubble of speed force energy. It protects us from friction, from turning into a cloud of burning ash when we hit Mach 1. It also protects the environment from us. It keeps us from setting the air on fire or creating catastrophic sonic booms every time we go out for a jog. Your problem is, you're not generating that aura consciously. You're just moving. Bypassing space. We need to teach you to run within space. How? We start slow. I want you to run from this wall to the other, Wally said, pointing across the 100-meter expanse. But I want you to feel every single step. Feel the soles of your shoes on the floor. Feel the air moving past your face. I want you to be present for the entire journey. If you teleport, you fail. Simple. It sounded easy. It was the hardest thing Izuku had ever done. The first time he tried, he barely managed to activate full cowling before he was standing at the far wall, the now familiar feeling of a time skip leaving him dizzy and nauseous. The only evidence of his passage was a faint crack of displaced air. Nope. Try again, Wally called out. The second, third, and 10th attempts were the same. The moment he tried to tap into his speed, the fusion of his powers would take the path of least resistance, simply moving him from point A to point B without the inconvenience of crossing the space between. He grew more and more frustrated, the static in his head buzzing with his agitation. Stop! Wally commanded after another failed attempt. You're trying to force it. You're thinking like a fighter. I need to get over there as fast as possible. Speed isn't about brute force, kid. It's about flow. It's like music. He walked up to Izuku. Close your eyes again. Feel the hum. This time, don't try to use it. Just let it envelop you. Imagine it covering you, from the top of your head to the soles of your feet. A thin, invisible second skin. That's the aura. It's your connection to the physical world when you're moving. Izuku did as he was told. He envisioned the energy, not as a storm inside him, but as a calm, protective layer around him. The frantic, crackling lightning that usually accompanied full cowling softened, its color shifting from a chaotic green-gold-red to a more stable, humming gold. That's it, Wally whispered. Now when you run, don't think about the destination. Think about the first step. And then the next one. And the one after that. Stay inside the moment. Izuku took a breath. He opened his eyes. He focused on the floor 10 feet in front of him, and pushed off. The world didn't vanish. It compressed. For the first time, he felt the sensation of true superspeed. The black walls of the training ground became gray streaks. He could feel the wind whipping past his ears, the solid impact of his feet hitting the floor in a rapid-fire staccato beat. He was moving, not just arriving. He crossed the 100 meters in what felt like a single, exhilarating second. He skidded to a halt at the far wall, a wide, breathless smile on his face. "I did it!" he yelled, his voice echoing in the vast space. "You did," Wally confirmed, already standing beside him. "And you only broke the sound barrier 3 times. We'll work on that." The days that followed blurred into a grueling, exhausting, and utterly transformative routine. Under Wally's tutelage, Izuku's learning curve was impossibly steep. He went from learning to control his aura to running laps so fast he could create controlled vortexes of wind. He learned to phase through objects with precision, a feat that started with concrete blocks and escalated to phasing through a series of complex, moving obstacles that Nisa designed with manic glee. Wally taught him the theory of the infinite mass punch, the speedster's ultimate weapon. "When you approach the speed of light," Wally explained, scribbling equations on a digital whiteboard, "relativistic effects take over. Your mass increases exponentially. An object with mass moving at light speed has infinite mass. A punch with infinite mass hits with infinite force. It's a universe ender if you're not careful." We are not practicing that, but the principle is what matters. Speed isn't just about being fast, it's about weaponizing physics. Izuku absorbed it all. His analytical mind, honed by years of studying quirks, latched onto the science of the speed force with an obsessive fervor. He filled notebooks with theories, equations, and diagrams. One for all stockpiling nature didn't just apply to power. It was giving him a level of intuitive understanding that bordered on precognition. He began to see the world not as a series of objects, but as a complex web of kinetic and potential energy. But for every victory, the grim reality of their situation loomed. During a break, as Izuku was rehydrating with a high-calorie nutrition shake that Recovery Girl had formulated for his new hypermetabolism, he looked at his mentor. Wally was staring at nothing, a haunted, distant look in his green eyes. "What was it like?" Izuku asked quietly. "You're home." Wally was silent for a long moment, the sounds of the gym's ventilation system filling the space. "It was loud," he said finally, a nostalgic smile touching his lips. "And bright. I lived in Central City, best city on Earth. We had a flash museum. Can you believe that? A whole museum for my uncle and me. My wife, Linda, she's a reporter. The smartest, toughest woman I've ever known. We have 2 kids, Iris and Jai." His smile faded. "They're speedsters too. They inherit the connection. When I run, I can sometimes feel them, like echoes in the static. Faint. But they're there." He looked at Izuku, his expression raw and vulnerable. "I left them, kid. I led death on a chase across reality and ended up here, and I don't know how to get back. I don't even know if I can get back." "We'll find a way," Izuku said with a fierce, unwavering conviction that was pure Midoriya. "When I can control this power, we'll find a way to get you home." Wally just nodded, looking away. "Yeah. Maybe." The moment was interrupted by a sudden, blaring alarm from the observation booth. Nisa's voice, stripped of its usual cheer and sharp with urgency, echoed through the speakers. "Mr. West. Midoriya, we are detecting a massive, localized dimensional distortion forming on the outskirts of Multiverse City. The energy signature it's a negative waveform, a complete inversion of the energy Midoriya is producing." Wally was on his feet in an instant, all traces of melancholy gone, replaced by the steely focus of a seasoned hero. His eyes met Izuku's, and the same chilling realization passed between them. "It's here," Wally said, his voice grim. "The beacon just got too bright to ignore." He looked at Izuku, at the boy who had mastered in days what had taken him years. He was a prodigy, a miracle. But he was still a rookie. He wasn't ready. A flicker of movement in the city caught Wally's eye, visible on the main monitor in the observation booth. A news helicopter was filming a strange phenomenon in a deserted industrial park. The air was shimmering, turning gray and colorless. Buildings were aging with impossible speed, their walls cracking and crumbling into dust in seconds. Life was being leached from the very environment, and in the center of the decay, a shape was coalescing. A grim, skeletal figure, its form like a photographic negative of a speedster, wreathed in roiling black lightning that seemed to suck the very light out of the air around it. It stood motionless, its head slowly turning as if sniffing the air, its empty eye sockets fixed in the direction of UA High. The black flash had arrived. And it knew exactly where its target was. The image on the monitor was a frozen tableau of existential horror. The black flash stood in the heart of the decaying industrial park, a void in the shape of a man. It wasn't just a villain, it was a blight, a tear in the fabric of the world that radiated a palpable aura of cessation. In the observation booth of Training Ground Omega, the sterile air grew cold, the sophisticated sensors and readouts on Nizu's console flickering erratically as if the very laws of information were being corrupted by the creature's presence. Izuku stared, his blood turning to ice in his veins. The abstract, cosmic threat Wally had described was now terrifyingly real, a skeletal specter standing under the familiar sky of his home city. The static in his head, his constant companion, was gone, replaced by a profound and terrifying silence. It was the silence of a predator that has stopped stalking and is now preparing to pounce. He could feel its attention, a cold, focused pressure on his soul, like the gaze of a sniper through a high-powered scope. "It's not moving," Toshinori observed, his voice a low, tense rumble. He stood beside Nizu, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. "It's just standing there." "Is it waiting?" "It doesn't need to move," Wally said, his voice grim. He hadn't taken his eyes off the screen, but his body was coiled, a spring of kinetic potential ready to be unleashed. "It's an extension of the Speed Force. It knows where we are. It knows where he is." He cast a sideways glance at Izuku. "It's not waiting. It's savoring. It's watching the prey realize the trap has sprung. Its energy signature is causing a localized entropy cascade," Nizu stated, his usual intellectual curiosity replaced by cold, hard analysis. "Time in its immediate vicinity is accelerating towards its endpoint. Matter is decaying, energy is dissipating. If it were to appear in a populated area," he didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication was clear. This wasn't a creature that threw punches or fired energy blasts. Its very existence was a weapon of mass destruction. Izuku felt a tremor run through his body, a vibration that had nothing to do with the Speed Force. It was pure, unadulterated fear. But beneath it, something else was stirring. The core of his being, the part of him that had sent him running, quirkless, toward a sludge monster, was igniting. That thing, that monster, was a threat to his home. To his mother. To his friends. To All Might. The fear was still there, a howling gale in his mind, but the imperative to act, the hero's soul, was the bedrock beneath it. "What do we do?" Izuku asked, his voice shaking but steady. He looked to Wally, his teacher, his mentor, the only person in this reality who understood the nature of the enemy. Wally finally tore his gaze from the monitor and looked at Izuku. His green eyes were sharp, intense, and utterly serious. "There is only one rule, Izuku. The first and last rule of dealing with that thing. There is only one thing you can ever do." He took a deep breath, and the next word he spoke seemed to echo with the weight of every speedster who had ever faced this ultimate adversary. "Run." Before the word had even fully registered, Wally was in motion. He grabbed Izuku by the shoulder of his gym uniform. "We can't let it get to the school. We have to draw it away. Let it on a chase. Keep it focused on us." "A diversionary tactic," Toshinori said, nodding in grim understanding. "I will go as well. I can still—" "No," Wally cut him off, his tone absolute. "You can't. You're not fast enough. To that thing, you're a statue. You'd be dead before you even knew the fight started. Your job is to stay here, coordinate with the other heroes. Evacuate the area around it if you can, but do not, I repeat, do not, let anyone engage it directly. They won't be fighting it, they'll be feeding it. It will absorb their life force just by being near them." Toshinori's face tightened with frustration, the agony of a warrior being told to stand down, but he saw the stark, undeniable truth in Wally's eyes. Wally turned back to Izuku, his grip on his shoulder tightening. "Listen to me. We are going to run faster than you have ever run before. You are going to use everything I taught you. Form your aura, stay present. Don't think, just react. I will take point. You match my speed. You do not fall behind. You do not stop. Do you understand me? Izuku looked from Wally's determined face to the skeletal figure on the screen, then back. He swallowed the lump of fear in his throat and gave a single, sharp nod. I understand. Good. Hold on. Without another word, Wally's body erupted in a torrent of golden lightning. The energy enveloped them both, a cocoon of pure speed force. The sterile, black walls of training ground Omega dissolved into a blur. There was a soundless clap of thunder, a violent displacement of air, and they were gone. In the observation booth, Tashinori and Nizu were thrown back against the wall by the sheer force of the vacuum they left behind. When they looked up, the training ground was empty. XXX. The transition was jarring. One moment Izuku was in the void of the training hall, the next he was standing on a rooftop overlooking the decaying industrial park, the acrid smell of dust and ruin filling his lungs. The city of Multiverse spread out before him, a familiar, comforting sight that was now tainted by the unnatural blight at its edge. He could see the black flash, a mile away, a black pinprick of absolute dread. It knows we're here, Wally said, his voice tight. His body was thrumming, the speed force crackling around him in a visible golden aura. It's changing its focus. As if on cue, the skeletal figure on the ground below slowly lifted its head. Its empty sockets seemed to lock directly onto them, seeing past the distance, past the physical barriers, and peering directly into their souls. And then it moved. It didn't run. It didn't blur. It simply flowed, its body becoming a river of pure blackness that streamed across the ground at an impossible speed, leaving a trail of gray, dead earth in its wake. It was a liquid shadow, silent, relentless, and utterly without wasted motion. Now! Wally yelled. He pushed off the rooftop, not jumping, but simply stepping out into the empty air. For a horrifying second, Izuku thought he was going to fall, but then Wally's feet found purchase on the air itself, his speed creating a solid path beneath him. He was running down an invisible staircase towards the city streets. Izuku didn't hesitate. He activated One for All, the green lightning of his quirk instantly fusing with the golden-red corona of the speed force. He created his aura, the invisible skin of energy Wally had taught him to form, and plunged off the roof after his mentor. The fear was a scream at the back of his mind, but his training took over. He focused on his feet, on the flow, and he ran. The world became a symphony of motion. The cityscape, which should have been a dizzying, nauseating blur, was rendered with a strange, surreal clarity. He could see every window on every building, every crack in the pavement, every leaf on every tree, all frozen in a single, extended moment of time. They hit the street, and the chase began in earnest. Wally was a streak of pure crimson and gold, his form fluid and effortless. He weaved through the sparse traffic of the industrial district, phasing through a moving truck at one intersection, running up the side of a building at the next to avoid a blockade. He was a master artist, and the city was his canvas. Izuku was a different story. He was a raw, uncontrolled explosion of green and white lightning. He was faster. He knew it with a terrifying certainty. The fusion of One for All and the Speed Force gave him a level of raw power that Wally couldn't match. But he lacked finesse. He was a sledgehammer to Wally's scalpel. He couldn't replicate Wally's effortless grace. When he came to the truck Wally had phased through, he didn't have the time or the focus to go intangible. Instead, he jumped. He pushed off the asphalt with a burst of power, his leap carrying him over the truck, over the entire intersection, landing with a ground-shaking impact a block away that cracked the pavement and sent spiderwebs of fractured concrete spreading from his feet. Control it, Izuku! Wally's voice echoed in his mind, a telepathic shout carried on the speed force current. Don't break things. You're wasting energy. Be like water. Behind them, the black flash was gaining. It didn't bother with obstacles. It flowed through them, over them, under them. A car in its path didn't get hit. It just aged into a pile of rust and rotten rubber as the creature passed through it. It didn't run on the street. It was the street, its shadowy form spreading and contracting as it moved, an amoeba of absolute death. The chase led them out of the industrial park and into the more populated areas of the city. People screamed. Cars swerved and crashed as two impossible blurs of color shot past them, followed by a creeping, world-ending shadow. The air cracked with sonic booms, a constant, rolling thunder that shattered windows for miles in their wake. Izuku's ears popped, but the sound was distant, muted, as if happening to someone else. His world had narrowed to the crimson figure of Wally in front of him, and the creeping dread of the darkness behind him. Wally was leading them on a specific path, Izuku realized. He was sticking to main thoroughfares, wide avenues, and wherever possible, leading them towards the coastline. He was trying to minimize collateral damage, to keep the chase away from the dense, labyrinthine residential areas. It was the act of a true hero, thinking of others even in the midst of a life-or-death race. Izuku, however, was just trying to survive. His heart hammered in his chest, a frantic drumbeat against the symphony of speed. His lungs burned, not from lack of air, but from the sheer energy he was processing. He was a conduit for a star, and it was taking its toll. The black flash was relentless. Every time Wally would use a trick, a sudden phase shift, a ricochet off a building at a 90-degree angle, the creature would simply flow past the obstacle, its path unnervingly direct and efficient. It wasn't trying to outsmart them. It was just an inevitability, a mathematical certainty, and it was simply closing the distance, meter by agonizing meter. Izuku risked a glance over his shoulder. The creature was closer now, close enough for him to see the details of its form. It had no face, just a skull-like visage with empty sockets that burned with a cold, black fire. Its body was emaciated, skeletal, but it was wrapped in tendrils of negative lightning, black energy that seemed to consume the light around it. It wasn't just chasing him. It was unmaking the world as it came. As he looked, one of its skeletal hands reached out. Its fingers, impossibly long and sharp, stretched across the distance between them. It was a gesture of pure, predatory hunger. That sight, that direct, personal threat, shattered Izuku's focus. The fear he had been holding at bay washed over him in a tidal wave. His control over his aura wavered for a fraction of a second. It was all the opening the universe needed. His left foot, moving at well over Mach 5, struck the asphalt without the protective friction-dampening layer of the Speed Force aura. The result was catastrophic. The kinetic energy that should have propelled him forward was instead converted into a massive, explosive release of heat and force. The sole of his reinforced gym shoe was instantly vaporized. The asphalt beneath it superheated, turning molten and then exploding in a shower of fiery shrapnel. The shockwave blew out the windows of every building on the block and sent a dozen cars tumbling through the air like children's toys. The explosion threw Izuku off balance. He stumbled, his incredible momentum sending him into an uncontrollable, rolling spin. He crashed through the front of a department store, a meteor of green and white light, shattering glass and steel. He tumbled through aisles of mannequins and designer clothes, his body a human wrecking ball, before finally crashing through the back wall of the store and coming to a stop in the alleyway behind it, buried under a pile of drywall and twisted metal. Pain. For the first time, he felt real, searing pain. His left leg was on fire, the skin from the knee down flayed and burned raw by the friction. His body was a collection of deep bruises and gashes from the impact. He lay there dazed, the world spinning around him. He heard a sound. A soft, scraping sound. He pushed a piece of sheet metal off his chest and looked up. The alley was dark, cast in the shadow of the tall buildings. And standing at the entrance, silhouetted against the bright street, was the black flash. It had stopped. It cocked its head, its empty sockets fixed on him. It had him. Trapped. A new kind of fear seized Izuku, a primal, cornered animal terror. He tried to scramble backwards, but his injured leg screamed in protest. The skeletal figure took a slow, deliberate step into the alley. The brick walls around it began to gray and crumble, the life and color draining away as it approached. The discarded trash in the alley, cardboard boxes, plastic bags, aged into dust and blew away on a non-existent wind. This was it. This was how he died. Not in a blaze of glory, not protecting someone, but alone in a filthy alley, erased from existence by a monster from another universe. All his dreams, his promise to All Might, his desire to be a hero, all of it was about to be turned to dust. The black flash raised its hand, its deathly touch reaching for his shoulder. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut, a single, hot tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, All Might. Crimson. A blur of red and gold slammed into the black flash with the force of a freight train. Wally West, his face a mask of furious determination, had come back. He didn't try to punch it. He didn't try to fight it. He simply hit it, using his own body as a projectile, a living cannonball of pure speed force energy. The impact didn't create a boom, it created a strange, warping sound, like a vinyl record being scratched. The black flash was thrown back, not physically, but conceptually. Its form destabilized for a moment, dissolving into a cloud of chaotic black lightning before coalescing back into its skeletal shape at the other end of the alley. It was unharmed, but its relentless advance had been broken. Wally skidded to a halt between Izuku and the monster, his body crackling with golden energy. I told you not to stop, he yelled, not looking back at Izuku. I told you to keep running. I'm sorry. I lost control. Izuku choked out, trying to push himself up. No time for sorry. Wally snapped. He glanced at Izuku's leg. Can you run? I don't know. The black flash had recovered. It let out a silent, psychic shriek of rage that vibrated in their skulls, and lunged. Wally reacted instantly. He grabbed Izuku, pulling him to his feet, ignoring his cry of pain. You're about to find out. He pushed Izuku, hard, towards the other end of the alley. Go! The command was absolute. Izuku's training, his instincts, his sheer terror, they all screamed the same thing. Run! He ignored the fire in his leg and pushed off, his body erupting in its chaotic aura once more. He burst out of the alley and onto a new street, not daring to look back. He could hear the sounds of the impossible battle behind him. The strange, record-scratching impacts, the hum of Wally's golden lightning clashing with the silent void of the black flash's negative energy. Wally wasn't fighting it. He was stalling it. He was buying him time. He was risking his own existence to give Izuku a head start. The realization hit Izuku with the force of a physical blow. Wally was going to sacrifice himself for him. Just like his own mother would. Just like All Might would. He was a hero. No. The thought was a defiant roar in Izuku's mind. I am not going to let someone else die for me. Not again. Not ever. A new resolve, hard as diamond, formed in the core of his being. He wasn't just going to run away. He was going to get better. He was going to get faster. He was going to master this power, and he was going to save the man who was currently saving him. But for now, he had to run. He poured more power into his speed, pushing past the pain in his leg. The city blurred past him, the sonic booms he was creating a trail of destruction in his wake. But he didn't care. All that mattered was getting away, drawing the monster's attention. The sounds of the fight behind him faded, and a new, more terrifying sound took their place, the soft, scraping footfalls of the black flash. Wally's heroic stand had lasted only a few seconds. The creature was back on his trail, its focus once again locked entirely on him. It was faster now. Angrier. It was no longer just flowing. It was sprinting, its skeletal legs pumping, its form a perfect, horrifying parody of a runner. Izuku pushed himself harder, channeling more of One for All into the engine. The green lightning around him intensified, the power output becoming dangerously unstable. He was running on pure adrenaline and desperation. He saw the ocean in front of him. Wally's plan. Get it away from the city. But the black flash was too close. It was right behind him, its cold aura washing over his back, sapping his strength, his will, his very life force. He could feel its bony fingers reaching, about to close around his neck. In that moment of absolute, final desperation, Izuku did the only thing he could think of. He didn't just try to run faster on the ground. He remembered Wally running on air. He remembered the lessons about vibration, about control. He screamed, a raw, primal sound of defiance, and he channeled everything, One for All at a theoretical 200%, every ounce of speed force he could contain, his fear, his resolve, his promise to save Wally, into a single, explosive burst of speed. He didn't just break the sound barrier. He broke the reality barrier. The world didn't just blur, it dissolved. The concrete pier he was running on vanished. The blue of the sky and the ocean bled together into a violent swirl of color. The sounds of the city, the roar of the wind, the scrape of the black flash's feet, all of it was gone, replaced by a deafening, all-encompassing hum. A tunnel of kaleidoscopic light erupted around him, a vortex of impossible energies. Red, gold, green, blue, purple, they all streamed past him, not as colors, but as concepts. He was no longer in Multiverse. He was no longer on Earth. He had, in a moment of pure instinct and terror, run so fast that he had punched a hole straight through the dimensional wall and into the speed force itself. He tumbled through the energy stream, disoriented and overwhelmed. He looked back. The hole he had created was rapidly closing, a shrinking pinprick of his reality. He saw the black flash, its form distorted and stretched, trying to force its way through before the gateway sealed. And then he saw Wally. A crimson blur. Wally threw himself at the portal, not trying to get through it, but positioning himself between the black flash and the opening. He was acting as a shield, a final, desperate act of obstruction. The portal snapped shut with a silent, final thunder. Izuku Midoriya was alone, a castaway adrift on an infinite river of lightning. He was safe, for a moment, but he and his mentor were now separated by the walls of reality, with the avatar of death standing between them. The race wasn't over. It had just escalated to a whole new, terrifying level.